we've just installed this new bed on the trampoline. Now I did actually install one here over 20 years ago, and I did it for a step-by-step process to show you how to install trampolines below ground to make it safer. Now up till then there were only trampolines with bright surrounds, and so I contacted the late apprentice, and he actually started Super Trampolines, and he made a lovely cartoon surround for me, so it wasn't so obvious, and I worked out a way to take them into the ground. And if you want information on that, you can download the link below, and it will give you a total photographic step-by-step, everything you need and how you do it. So why have I just put a new bed on it now? My children are obviously grown up, but I now have a grandson who's 2.5 years old. He came over for Dublin, and so we got a new bed for him, and I have to say he loved it. It was a big hit. Because he's only 2.5 years old, obviously he was heavily supervised. But hopefully this will now do him for the next 20 years. So why are trampolines so popular? Well, first off, they're great fun, aren't they? They really are. You can see children using them very young, to people of 8 plus. And they are fantastic exercise, both for your core muscles when you bounce. You actually start trampolining, and within 2 days you will really see a difference to your core muscles. But also they're fantastic aerobic exercise. You really start puffing. Added to which, it's very good for your balance, and then also it's much better for your joints. So if you've got problems with knees and hips and things, because it's a nice soft band, unlike a treadmill or jogging, it's much easier on your joints. So I think they're also brilliant for children who play together. When children are younger, you'd want them to play together, to learn how to communicate together. And with something like a trampoline, as long as they're obviously supervised, they can actually play games together. And for many years, our children used these trampolines daily. They really were amazing. And we've put them in gardens where clients have had indoor swimming pools, and they've complained to me afterwards they never use the pool anymore. All they do is use the trampoline. That's just how popular they are. There have been quite a few reports in the press from accidents from trampolines. Initially, the swing used to be the most dangerous play equipment because you're out of control as you're swinging. But now I think possibly the trampoline has become the #1 dangerous piece of equipment. So you need to address this to make sure that your children are going to play safely. So when my children were young, I was doing a garden for a medic, and she was also a trampoliner. And so she gave me some great tips. She said, first of all, send your children to trampoline lessons, which I did, because then they learn about basic rules of safety and things like that. Secondly, I think when you sink them into the ground, they are much safer than if they're raised above ground. Now, when you go to trampoline parks, the bounce on trampolines in trampoline parks is way in excess of a domestic trampoline. And when you have a domestic trampoline and you sink it in the ground, it will not bounce as high as if it's on top of the ground. And this is because as you bounce, the air cannot escape from around the side so well as when it's freestanding. And I remember writing an article in the Telegraph many years ago about sinking a trampoline in the ground, and someone wrote and complained, and the children had bounced on it before and then they bounced on it afterwards, and she said, oh, the bounce was no near as good. So for my mind, that actually puts my mind at rest a bit, and I'm quite happy with that. But if you're concerned about that, maybe don't let them bounce on it before you sink it, and then they won't know the difference. I also banned my children from doing somersaults on it, because I think when you do somersaults in the air on a trampoline, you might be more vulnerable to falling and having a nasty neck or back injury. So I used to ban that. And then when you've got visiting children coming, I think you need to supervise them, because the problems arise when you've got a big kid on one end and a little kid on the other, and they can just bounce them off the trampoline. So you need to have really strict ground rules when other children are there and make sure that they are being safe and safety conscious, because when they get into their stride and they're having fun and they've got the radio blaring music and they're bouncing away, all these sort of things can go out of the window. So you do need to supervise. But we've never had an accident on the trampoline here at all. So I think it is worth being strict. And if you don't trust your children to do what you say, then perhaps they shouldn't use the trampoline. So those are a few safety guidelines, and it is maybe a bit killjoy to mention them, but I think it is important. You want your children to be happy and safe in the garden, and children will always use a bit of a kit to the extremes if they can, so you have to be aware of that. So it was quite a simple operation to install the initial trampoline into this hole. It took us half a day. There were a team of 4 of us. We hired a mini digger, but if you can't get a mini digger into your garden, you can dig them by hand. And Supertramp do now make trampolines with legs that go half the distance, so you don't have to dig out so much earth. And then with the earth that we dug up, we put it around the edge in a mini amphitheatre really, so we didn't have to cart any soil off site. So we dug the hole just marginally wider than 4.25 metres diameter, which is the largest size of circular trampoline we could get. And then we had 2 scaffold boards and we lowered it down with the 4 of us into the hole, leaving a hole around the edge for the person to come out when we'd actually got the trampoline in the hole. And then you just pat back the earth around the sides, and then we turfed it. And that turf just held the soil quite close to the edge of the trampoline. And the soil was just about an inch proud of the trampoline top. Now the earth just falls naturally over the legs, and it just forms the natural angle of repose of the soil. So some soils will hold quite a steep angle, like a clay soil, and some sandy soils will have a much gentler angle. But I was amazed when we re-put the bed in for this new bed on it, the legs were absolutely fine and they were still structurally sound after 20 odd years. Now we've put maybe 25, 50 trampolines in gardens, and always when I write the specs for how to do it, I say if you hit the water table and there's water underneath the trampoline, because you are going down a distance of not short of a metre, then you have to allow for a sump and drainage. But we've never ever had to do that, surprisingly, and we've done some quite wet sites. I would never build a retaining wall around the edge to hold the earth. I think it's an unnecessary over-engineering approach. The earth can just fall over the legs and it's absolutely sound like that. So basically it's a simple operation, and it looks so much less obtrusive when it's set into the ground, and I think it's so much safer. When Roy Lancaster, the famous plantsman who was on Gardener's Question Time with me on a programme, came to visit the garden once, he saw it and he thought it was a pool from a few metres back. So it does really blend into the garden, and if you've got a tiny space, that's really quite important. So a couple of weeks ago, we actually replaced the bed and replaced the pads around the edge. Now Supertramp sadly had run out of the khaki green, and because I was in a hurry to get it here, they sent me this brighter green one instead, which isn't my favourite, but it's fine, it's fine. And the operation was really quite simple. We just removed the remains of the old bed, and all that had happened, several springs had gone and the attachments to the bed had gone in a few places, which I think of over 20 years, that's not too bad. And the bed, the actual padding around the edge was a bit torn in places. So we removed them, and then we put the new bed on, and we had to use maybe 2 people this time. And then we put the padding back. And we haven't totally filled in all the gaps yet, so that's still a job to do. And as you can see, it's a very dry summer, and so the grass around it looks quite khaki and dried out. But come August, September, when we've had a bit of rain, hopefully it'll all green up quite nicely. And what is great is that many members of the family use that. And that's what's great about these trampolines. They're really invigorating, they're really energizing, they're great for getting fit, and they're fun. So I can see we're going to have another 25 years of happy bouncing on this wonderful trampoline.